Hey folks, how many of you get to play Grandmaster Short? All right, let me ask another question. How many of you get to beat short or draw short? Not many people. So it's an honor to play short. And how did I end up playing him? So I was basically looking for a game at chess.com, and basically looking at my screen, and I saw short. I'm being paired by short, and I was like, wow. Never get to play him before. He's, I would say he's an icon, legendary when it comes to chess. He's very well known. He was competing the world championship against Gary Kasparov. So if you get to play him even in 1 minute chess or blitz games, it's always an honor. As soon as I saw his name and I'm taking white pieces, I figured that I needed to try, especially when I'm having the white pieces here, and I wanted to stay competitive. I may never get to play him, again. So it's my chance to try to stay competitive. So I ended up playing d4. He played knight f6, and here already I felt like, what should I be doing? Do I play the main lines, c4? Should I play a sideline? Should I play, what opening do I really need to do here? I'm not a believer that openings really matter in a blitz games. This is actually a 3-0, which, this is very fast time control. I don't think openings matter that much in a blitz games. There's a flag taking into concern. There's mouse speed. There's a lot of factors come into online games, so anything could happen, and you don't need to really play the main openings, main lines. You could always play sidelines if you have to. I like to play the sidelines off the beat openings, especially when it comes to online chess. So I end up playing bishop g5. This is actually Tromposky's attack. It could be fun because many people doesn't see it coming. They might not be prepared for it, because it happens right away, like as soon as you play knight f6. So he ended up playing e6, so I end up playing e4. The idea here is pretty simple though. As soon as you play e4, you have to be prepared because h6 is possibly the response here, and if you end up going back, or bishop e3, knight takes e4. You don't want this to happen, especially if you're playing short. So as soon as h6 happens, you do have to take on f6. Now, not many people are really happy to do this in an opening early on. You're giving the bishop pair. That's true. You do give the bishop pair to your opponent early on. The idea is you do have some center play here, which white do control the center. For some time, it could be proven to be strong for white. In the meantime, black could say, well, I have the two bishops. He could open up lines. He could prove that, as soon as you take on f6, that black could have an advantage. That happens to be true, but this is actually still remains a blitz game, so anything could really happen. So I end up playing c3, which is pretty typical here. You control the center much more. d5 is to be expected. I end up playing bishop e3, and this is actually interesting. So if you take here, bishop takes, it could be interesting as far as how this bishop gets developed, because bishop here is attacking on b7 for some time, which actually happened in the game. So I wasn't really, I was really happy here with this kind of trade. The problem during the game that I had here is I felt like knight e2 is not the right move here. I think knight f3 was best for me. Why? It's controlling e5 much more. You want to control the center. The only time you may consider knight e2 if you're really jumping knight f4, there are some lines in the Tromposky where you play knight f4, not in this one. So I should have probably played knight f3 here. Bishop g7, knight castles, knight d7, knight d2. Knight e2 is interesting because obviously, this is the only way you could develop. You could also play knight a3 with the idea of knight c4. Knight d2 is more obviously towards the center. There's also interesting idea that maybe I could bring the bishop back, knight e4, and stopping some kind of ideas like c5 as much as I can. He ended up castling here, bishop f3. Rook d8. Now, rook d8 is an interesting move because simply he might try c5 and the queen is sitting on d1, so I felt like maybe I needed to, get to prepare myself to play queen c2 at some point. a4 actually is interesting for white. The idea is maybe e4, e5, trying to prove that, I could play all the way a6, maybe e5, disallowing the knight to come to b6. I'm playing short, so obviously he's not going to allow all of this. So a5 is typical response here. So obviously I get out of the way from the rook, so obviously here queen c2, knight e4, the rooks are connected now. Rook b8, and I actually do like this move. He's now able to defend on b7, so there's no longer a concern. He's actually looking at b6 and bishop a6, which is actually an interesting idea. During the game, I kind of felt like this is now typical grandmaster play where he's going to prove that the two bishops are really good. So I end up playing knight c4. I actually don't like this move. The reason I don't like this move is actually helping black to play b6 anyway, and this is lining up perfectly for black. I think what I should have been, which I should have considered knight e4. This is more, more direct, and maybe rook e1 after this, and you could still stopping c5. You also attacking the queen on f6. I feel like knights, obviously knight here is it's a little bit, helping black pretty much, which it doesn't really help my case here as far as having any kind of advantage. Maybe I'm fighting for a draw at this point, believe it or not, after knight c4. So short played b6, and here. As I predicted that b6 is the move. Here I played here. So I managed to get the other knight involved. Basically getting the knight involved. Hold on, folks. I need to refresh here. I needed to refresh. Sorry about that. We going back here. All right, that looks better. So I end up playing knight g3. The idea is knight e4. So I figured that, I could keep my knight on c4, but I could get my other knight on e4. And I have both pieces activated this way. It's not the right play because bishop a6 is coming. Now he's looking at this kind of diagonal. And here we go. The two bishops going to really prove that they are really strong in the diagonals. So I end up playing bishop e2, and I actually like what he's doing the next move. He's doing some kind of interesting maneuver here. He wants to take some diagonal here, and I end up playing here. And I'm not sure if I'm better at this point. I think black is really controlling the game. I mean, at this point, I would just be happy with a draw. Now, this is actually, h5 is actually a really interesting move. This is one way to prove that the two bishops are really working together. He wants to play h4, h3, and the idea of bishop b7 is to really just having this scope right this way and try to have some ideas against my king. So I end up playing bishop e4, and now this is the maneuver I'm talking about. He went back to bishop e6. So I figured that maybe it's a draw. He's looking for a draw. But obviously h4 is coming, and I had to play knight e4. Queen f4 is his choice. So it's interesting. I think maybe I missed g3. Was idea that the queen may not be properly placed on f4. Maybe I'm assuming queen e7 maybe. I think maybe g3, the reason I did not play it because it may weaken up my king. But I think in this specific situation here, you could play g3. I don't think queen f3 is really the move here. I think he probably gonna go, he could play queen f3, but I felt like the queen is not really placed very well on f4. I think also queen f3 walks into knight d2. During the game, I did consider it, but I felt like it's, I might be weakening up my king. This is actually 3-0, so at this point we only have below 2 minutes. So you do have to make your choices really fast enough. You don't have time. Now I think c5 is interesting, and I think maybe I had like some kind of a jump on d6. Um, I did not, but I end up playing g3 now. So I felt like the reason why I play g3 now because I have my queen on e2, but I didn't really consider the idea before. Like, okay, so what if he plays queen f3? I could have basically attacked somehow. I could play knight d2, and he pretty much have to go back. I think I made a poor choice that I probably had to play g3 first, because after here he could simply go back to c7, and now the problem is the two bishops are really working together, and exactly what I trying to avoid pretty much. So I had to basically take. If I don't take, he simply take here, and he has some tremendous pressure going on against the knight at c4. So I pretty much had to take. He took back, and he took back on c5. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is borderline losing for white. I needed to find a way to basically get back into the game and stay competitive. I was still determined that maybe I could somehow able to trade down pieces. I think if white is able to manage to trade around one of the knights, or trade one of the bishops, it may possibly be a draw. Maybe possible be a draw. I wouldn't count on it, but I feel like black is able to win this with the right play. So here is the suspense now. So I end up playing knight e5, and I feel like this is not the best move too. And to my surprise, this is where short, I think, went wrong. I think he could easily take here, perhaps. But he took this way, and I'd end up taking here, of course, because obviously there's a pin. Can't take it with a queen. I feel like black is the next move is probably almost winning here, because simply queen d5. Now look at this. The diagonals are pretty very strong, and this is actually my worry with c3, that my king is weak now. So here I really had not many choices here. I'd end up playing rook d1, and also I couldn't play knight f4 because simply he could take. He would be up a piece at this point. So rook d1, I felt like rook d8, I was preparing only move here, knight f4. And this is the only way I could keep the game going. I feel like here black has really strong move, and the strong move is he just simply take, and the idea wasn't knight takes. You do have to take with the rook. So I took this way, and to my surprise that this was not played. I was actually shocked by this during the game. I think this is the only way you could play this. And the idea is pretty simple though. You do takes, you end up with two bishop versus a rook. In a situation like this, I would say I would take this at any given day against the rook, especially in a position like this. Maybe there are some play on the queen side, but I don't think it's really the two bishops really dominates here. I think if rook takes and knight takes was actually something I was also preparing, but the problem is rook d2 and how exactly you play this against somebody like short. The problem is takes, knight here, rook d2. You end up having to defend here, I think, and rook takes b2. You down a pawn, c3 is weak. I think it's reasonable to play like in a position like this. So maybe I have to basically go for this and rook versus two bishops in a blitz game. To my surprise, he actually played pawn takes, and I was like, pawn takes. I was very shocked by this because I was basically knight takes c2, and now the drawing chances are pretty very high at this point. I mean, now how could black really win this game? The pawn at h4 is no longer a concern. We traded the heavy pieces now, so I don't have much trouble here. Perhaps the draw is basically something that I could really play for now. So he ended up playing d4. He's still determined that he could create some stuff here, which I actually agree that he still have some interesting play. that he could still manage to try to get some initiative. But the problem here is knight takes here, and I take back. I feel like this is a draw, but I still like blacks. Rook endings is not always a draw, and you, especially with grandmasters, they do know how to play the rook endings, and they are really fully experienced on, do you know if it's a draw or a win. So his rook is so active. The problem is his rook is way active, and sometimes active rook is enough to win a game. It doesn't have to be like you have to up a pawn. So at this point, like, I am equal amount of pawns, right? And the problem is my rook is passive. If I'm able to move my king, and I end up moving my king at g2, I'm not really sure if this is a draw. I would say it was the best. I mean, I'm assuming this is under 1 minute here. It's easy to draw this in a 1 minute time control. But I had to be precise, even though it looks like, okay, I mean, it looks pretty much symmetrical, but I feel like during the game that king e3, after this happened, I feel like I was comfortable here to draw. I think the problem was b5. I also looked at b5 where it's around here. As soon as he played rook b4, though, the only idea that comes to mind to me is after rook b1 is b5. His b5 is winning. The idea if you take an e4, I don't think this works. You could take rook takes, and you may start moving here, and you may still have a drawing chances. But I think maybe this is the only way black could have tried this, and he had it in so many lines. I mean, he had b5 at so many lines. The only problem is if he delay b5 and the king start moving here, it might be too late. Like, it might be a draw at this point. You could also sack the pawn, and you may end up drawing the game in this kind of... and because the rook would be active. My rook would be active at this point. So to my surprise, he actually played h3, and I don't think it really matters. Now my king gets to d3, so b5 is no longer a problem, I don't think, now. So king c3 and rook e4. At this point, I feel like I'm able to hold a draw. At this point, I feel like rook d1 is pretty draw here. The problem with rook d1, obviously, for black is rook d6. So I was able to activate my rook. And here's the lesson for people tuning in and watching this game on YouTube. As soon as he let go on b4, rook d1 was really the only active move for white, and it's not just simply this is an open file. It's actually rook d6 takes on b6, and now that's a problematic for black. He can't really allow to take here unless he's looking for rook takes f2, and there's no clear idea that he's actually going to take on f2. He actually tried, so he went for this, and I think if you go for this, he may actually go for f2 and h2 because this is the reason why he played h3. But the problem is rook d2. And I don't think here there's any improvements for black. I also felt like he had maybe f4 also in some of the lines, but I think they all lead to a draw. I mean, if we go back here, though, during the game I looked at possible, was it f4 instead of here? Maybe, but there are always lines where you could simply play g4. There's also f4 early on here. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it works. Yeah, it may work around here, but it doesn't really do anything for black in terms of improvements. So as soon as he played rook e2, I end up playing rook d2 here, and I feel like it's a draw because simply how black could improve his game. So he can't really go here. Maybe this is something that I could possibly do and then go back. So short actually took. And here I was very confident I would be able to draw the legendary short. So king e3, and I don't think here there's any improvement. By the way, here he actually played on, and I end up offering him a draw because I was happy with the draw here because the position is really drawn here. He actually played on, and to my surprise, I could have went on to try to flag him. I did not like the idea of doing this, especially with short. If I wanted to beat him, I wanted to beat him in a position, not necessarily on time. And I was very determined that I would draw the game, not necessarily flag him. you could see the time is getting short for him. And maybe I could have played here, like I continue and letting him go to c3. He may eventually able to promote. I may be up on time and I may win on time, but I did decided not to do this. So obviously after trading on here, f4, he went back here. You have to be careful that, you know, if there's more time, let's say there's more time for black. If you play a king f3 and allows king d4, it's actually winning for black. Because, you know, the b4 is actually much faster than your h pawn. So here is pretty much I'm forcing the draw, king d4. If he end up playing king f6, you're looking at white is now winning, not black. King d5, and eventually go to king here. You take on f5. So he pretty much have to play king d6. And then I end up playing king c4. And it's the same thing if he plays here, is maybe stepping up to c5. And obviously that forcing him to, you know, go back and forth. So here I end up, you know, I forced the draw. I'm pretty much happy with the draw here against Legendary Short. And hopefully you guys enjoyed that game. And stay tuned for more games to come, folks. Thank you for watching. Take care.